Welcome to 101. I'm Greg Bassett, your host from the Salisbury Independent newspaper. It's a big day here at PAC 14. Our favorite guest of the year of all time is back to give us the report from Annapolis, our state senator, Mary Beth Carozza. Welcome, Mary Beth.
It's good to be home.
So you're home from the mayhem of 90 days,
90
even
days.
though you work 12 months, not just 90 days.
Right, the intensity of the 90-day session, although I might add that I do come home every weekend to keep my balance. But yes, we finished up and I'm back and just really working the district, all 3 counties, all 11 municipalities, making the rounds and just hearing directly from folks, which I enjoy, which puts me in the best position to advocate for my constituents.
Well, I will attest to that because it was Easter weekend, and it was the busiest weekend of the session, the very end where all the stuff's going through the pipeline at the very end, and I sort of assumed that you'd be up there working. You're like, no, I'll be home for Easter. Of course I'll be home.
Of course I'll be home for Easter. And the way it worked out with the schedule, that was difficult. But I did go back Easter night because that last day, Easter Monday, was sine die, the last day of session. And of course, as you know, we go right up literally to midnight.
Now, last week there was a forum with the chamber which talked about things that had gone on. You really made an impression on me in something you said there, and it is this idea that people think our delegates and senators should just get things done on their own. They're supposed to exert power. And you made the point that it's really important that citizens speak up, attend these committee hearings, make their voices known, make their opinions known to other lawmakers, and that builds some gravitas for you in terms of trying to defeat or promote legislation. Talk about how important citizen involvement is.
So nothing beats our residents, our locals, from coming up to Annapolis in person now and testifying, showing their support, going to meetings, going to actually see the other delegates and senators that we have to make the case for their support. And when they do come up, it makes all the difference. And one key example, and I really want to give the entire Eastern Shore delegation credit for this, and it also goes to show when you do your homework before session starts that it will pay off. Back in the fall, Steve Leonard and his leadership team of Title Health came to the delegation and they laid it on the line. And they said, you know, our trauma center is in jeopardy. We have been trying to secure fair reimbursements at the state level from the Health Services Cost Review Commission since 2017, making the case because our volume and services has gone up, and yet our reimbursements have stayed flat, and they have not been successful in securing those funds and putting Title Health's trauma center in jeopardy, which affects not only the 500,000 locally here, but also statewide. Every Maryland jurisdiction has patients that have been serviced by our trauma center here at Title Health. You know, going to the beach, there's 8 million people a year that come. So when they laid it on the line and said, this is a crisis situation, we were able to put together a 3-pronged strategy. The first prong is to put that pressure on the Health Services Cost Review Commission. And with new leadership coming in with the governor and his new team, we were able to do that with the new budget secretary, the new health secretary. In addition, we needed some immediate funding in this year's budget. So we were able to add to the governor's budget $9.5 million for those trauma centers in Maryland that were facing these financial difficulties. And the way it was written, it was primarily so Title Health could pull down those funds. And then the third part of the strategy is that Delegate Tom Hutchinson from the Mid-Shore and I introduced legislation that was approved unanimously that set up a commission to look at the funding long-term for trauma centers in Maryland. This hasn't been looked at in 20 years. And I want to give, again, it was a team effort, Delegate Hutchinson being on the committee, Health Government Operations, working with his chair. I was able to work it on my side with the Budget Committee members and making the case that this legislation has to pass now. We have to put this commission on a short timeline to produce the results. And again, that was part of what was needed to move forward. So it's an example, going back to your question, that when we know and hear directly about a priority, way before we're going into session to develop a strategy. Some of it is legislation, but some of it is on the regulatory side, some of it's on the budget side. So that's what we do, I think, very well in this Eastern Shore delegation. But again, I did make the pitch to the members of the Salisbury Area Chamber of Commerce to be more involved in addition to just letting us know their priority list and their request list, work with us in developing the strategy so we can be successful.
Yeah, and I think as a newspaper guy, that's where I fail, where I don't get the word out on what's going on in terms of legislation. So when people finally get excited about it, it might be too late.
That's right. The early end is important, which as I'm making these rounds, everybody wants their end of session report.
Yeah.
Not only are we talking about what has occurred in this first session of a 4-year term, but I'm laying the groundwork to say, for example, we need more community involvement in order to pass violent crime legislation. That was a huge disappointment this session, to think that we were not able to even pass legislation that increases penalties for repeat violent offenders. You know, when we have examples like Tashika Hilliard and her family being affected, and others. So, you know, my point would be, we have a lot of work to do between now and next session, and I'm going to ask all the different groups to work with us on the front end. It puts us in the best position for results next session as well.
Yeah, and Title Health is a good example. You know, I felt good about the delegation because when I first learned about it, it was one of those classic things where Title Health finally comes out about it, and it's like, okay, if we don't get this money, we're going to have to do something. So then I started asking questions, and you guys had been on top of this thing and had been working through it the whole time. And I felt really good about the leadership in terms of the problem had been identified and there had been substantial work done on it.
And we all used our positions. So, for example, Steve Hershey, being the minority leader in the Senate, was able to elevate that issue. I was able to use my position on the Senate Executive Nominations Committee, that when these nominees for Budget Secretary and Health Secretary came in, that I could say, let me tell you about our shore priorities. I need to secure a commitment that you will work with us on this. You know, we all were in agreement that Title Health's doors are not going to shut, their trauma center doors are not going to shut. So you get that, an agreement, you secure that, and they know every time they see you coming, you're going to bring up and ask for an update on that. Delegate Carl Anderton being on the Appropriations Committee, you know, Delegate Hutchinson being on the Health and Government Operations Committee, Chris Adams using his leadership role on the heading up the Eastern Shore delegation. So we all played to each other's strengths on that, and it made a difference. You would see us coming, and the new administration would know that we would be pressing on this immediate priority for Title Health.
Now, on my phone, I have this little Google alert set up, and one of the names I have set up there is Mary Beth Carozza. And this session, your name came up in emails to me more than ever because you're being quoted in news stories. Are you moving up in terms of your importance, do you think?
I don't think it's about me. I think it's about we need to make sure there is some balance brought to our government overall. So if we step back and we look at this, this is the first year where we have, you know, a new governor, lieutenant governor, all statewide office holders held by Democrats. And after this election, the Maryland General Assembly elected more Democrats. So it is a whole new Annapolis. So we on the Eastern Shore have to look at the reality of the situation and how can we be most effective in promoting our shore priorities. What we need to do is leverage all of our positions and all of our strengths. So when I was assigned to the Senate Executive Nominations Committee, I was thrilled with that assignment because I knew that would allow me to meet all of the new cabinet secretaries coming in. You know, obviously having the opportunity to introduce former Salisbury Mayor Jake Day at his confirmation hearing, well, that relationship's already there, but it's strengthened now. Then to also, you know, the budget secretary, the health secretary, the public safety secretary with ECI in my district. So really leveraging all of that. And, you know, and making a point that one size does not fit all, and to really educate the governor and his administration on the priorities and the challenges that we face that are unique to the shore. So, I really approach this as a whole new Annapolis, and I have to, leverage my position. And then there were some fun opportunities as well. I was invited before the governor's inauguration, to attend a faith-based event in Prince George's County on a Sunday. And as you know, on Sundays, I normally don't leave the shore, but I thought, they've extended this invitation to me. I'm going to make the extra effort to show that I am accepting the invitation. I'm part of this faith-based ceremony, and to let them know that I am working in good faith, pardon the pun, on our shore priorities. And then there was I was appointed to the Special Olympics Maryland Board, which I didn't realize, of course, once I accepted that appointment, you have to walk the walk, which means you do plunge and do the polar plunge in the chilly Chesapeake Bay waters. And I did that with the governor and the lieutenant governor. I was the only state senator to do the plunge with the governor and the lieutenant governor.
I missed that. I didn't know you did that.
I did that at the end of January.
You should do the penguin swim with us for Atlantic General Hospital.
I guess I'll build up to that. So the point being, you take both the formal invitations and you take the impromptu events that allow you to build these relationships. And I've been very clear with the governor and the administration when I can agree with them and when I simply can't, and when I'm pushing for another point of view or another perspective or an amendment that would meet our shore priorities. So it's been exciting that way, with some new opportunities that I have not had in the past.
So what is your relationship? What do you think of him?
Well, yesterday I just saw him at a bill signing, and I made a point to personally introduce him to Lena Williams. She is the widow of the correctional officer, Greg Collins, who was killed back in 2001. And it's taking us this long with the investigation to rule that his death was a line of duty death. Once that was ruled, we wanted to make sure that she was in line for the special death benefits, and we had to specifically do legislation to make that happen. So yesterday was a big day when we came up, and there you are with the governor, and you're introducing your constituent and the other correctional officers that came up, retired correctional officers that came up with Lena, to the governor. And he jumped up and he hugged her and he thanked me for, introducing her. And that was very meaningful. It was one of those days where you have such great satisfaction of why you're in public service. And I've tried to, every chance I can, to, let him know what all the exciting opportunities in this district. And when I hear that he's down here and the lieutenant governor and they're making their rounds, when I can, I will try to join them. But, I'm always suggesting visits to them because, again, we have to fight for our fair share. We are outnumbered. And so that you have to work doubly hard to make sure that the Eastern Shore, our priorities, receive our fair of attention and funding.
In the last session, historically, you and Addie Eckert were quite a dynamic team of the state senators, mid-lower shore. And I think you and Johnny Mounts are even a better team.
We play to each other's strengths. I mean, Senator Eckert, her knowledge of healthcare issues, her serving on the budget committee, also the fact that she just liked to do so many different community events. And of course, my relationship with Johnny Mounts goes back to when we served in Governor Ehrlich's administration together. So we had that executive branch experience. We both served together as delegates. And, I'm in the Senate a few years, 4 years before he's come over. So it's really building on a strong foundation of trust. And we have been effective. We have worked some issues, given his business background, running owning and operating Carpenter Street Saloon. Also, he's a sportsman with hunting and on my committee with all those issues coming through. So we've been able to partner on both small business issues and on issues that affect the shore when it comes to Sunday hunting and other issues. So again, I think we've done a really good job of playing to everybody's strengths. And he's on the Senate Finance Committee, which is really key with the cannabis reform legislation went through there. The small business bills go through there. We were able to pull back a little bit on the acceleration of the minimum wage and take out that inflation index that was very devastating to our employers. We were able to stop the tip credit bill that both employees and employers were opposing. So when we're able, when I'm able to say, I have some of my constituents coming up and want to make sure that they can be heard in the Finance Committee. Or he'll say, I've got some hunters that are coming up from my district and they're testifying in your committee. So that's the way it works, and we've been able, again, as an Eastern Shore delegation, to be effective.
Yeah, Johnny surprised me. Friday, he was at the dedication to the Ann Street homeless village in Salisbury. He was walking around there and he was very impressed by it. And he actually said to me, he said, "Why didn't we think of this sooner? This is such a great idea. This is such a great thing." And I did not expect that coming from him.
No, he very much involved in the community. Of course, he represents 4 counties. I represent 3 counties. And the approach we've taken to Wicomico is if you represent part of Wicomico, you represent Wicomico. We were together last night at a Republican GOP event where 2 students from his district received scholarships, but they appreciated that they had both state senators from Wicomico County there. So we have to do that. Again, I think we feel the pressure that the sheer numbers, when you look at the Eastern Shore delegation, we have 12 delegates and 4 state senators. Well, that's a good healthy number, except when you compare that to Montgomery County, one county alone that has, I think 40 representatives. So again, we feel that pressure, and so we make an extra effort. We had our weekly Zoom meetings, with the Eastern Shore delegation, where the different constituencies did come in, and they were well attended by both the delegation and by the constituents that could Zoom in. So that would be an advantage. I would still like to do more of that in person, but I did notice that we were able to have multiple partners from the shore participate in the Zoom on a weekly basis, and I think that kept everybody up to speed on our priorities.
Last week was the dedication of the Guerreri Technology Building at Warwick Community College. You gave a little speech at that event, and I must say it was a very nice speech that you gave. Do you want to kind of recount what happened there?
So all the pieces came together, and when you think, what I wanted to do was pay tribute to the efforts and the partnerships that allowed this technology center, world-class technology center at Warwick Community College. And this has been in the making. And I wanted to highlight Dr. Hoy's leadership role. For years, we have been looking at our workforce challenges, the workforce shortages, the workforce challenges of keeping our youth and our adults who want to switch careers here on the shore. And this idea of bringing all the pieces together in a technology center that's going to provide training to keep our talent here on the shore. And, I was so impressed, everything, from the CDL training, the welding, the maker space. I spent about a half an hour in that maker space seeing, how you would be able to come in with your ideas and really shape it right there, have the support from Warwick, and putting our trainees, our students, in the position that they're going to be leading in all of these industries. And if you look at it, we have workforce shortages in every major industry. And we have a technology center with, great staffing, great leadership that are working with the employers. So anything they're doing over there, they've already talked to the employers on what the employers need. It was one of the most exciting days of my public service. And I really thought it was important to underscore the historic nature of the day and to really recognize all the partners. Dr. Hoy, the Guerreri family going back to their legacy with the poultry industry, to constantly giving back, to have Michael Guerreri there, and there's a reason why that name is on that building. And so I saw this as the best of the Eastern Shore with that dedication.
Yeah, it was just a great event, and like you definitely memorialized that through your comments, and you put it in a context that I hadn't thought about in terms of how important it was.
Thank you. I just thought it was important to do that.
So you've been involved in this cannabis thing, or been tagged in the cannabis thing for a long time. What happened in this last session, and how's it going to affect the state?
So cannabis reform was a major issue, driven primarily out of the Finance Committee. And when I say major issue, remember, we did the referendum before we put the infrastructure in place. So all of a sudden, okay, we have a referendum. We are going to legalize the recreational use of marijuana. Oh, we better put the infrastructure in place. Right. So there was this intense pressure. So first of all, you had to do the whole business side of it. And again, I want to give credit to my colleagues, Senator Hershey, who's quite an expert on the Finance Committee issues, as well as Senator Mounts. They were really focused on, okay, how do we make sure if you're setting up a business structure? There also was the investment that some hemp farmers had made prior to this going forward. So we wanted to make sure that there was a business structure put in place. My focus primarily was on the health and safety side. The public use of marijuana, public consumption of marijuana has caused major problems for us on the boardwalk and in all of our public parks, our public spaces. My point was, this was not an unintended consequence. This is a predictable consequence. You legalize the recreational use of marijuana, you can predict that the public consumption of marijuana is going to increase. And there are health and safety issues. What I wanted to do, and what I will continue to press for, is giving our local jurisdictions, so for example, if the town of Ocean City wants to pass legislation to increase the current statewide penalties, that they have the authority to do that, the penalties for using public use of marijuana. And what was very disturbing to me in the literally minutes before sine die, that a bill was pushed through that I called it the marijuana odor bill. They not only took away law enforcement's right to stop and search based on the smell of marijuana, which has been an incredible tool for law enforcement to seize illegal guns, illegal drugs, and contraband. Not only did they take that authority away from law enforcement, they actually lowered the penalties for smoking marijuana in public. So whereas before it was a $250 penalty, lowering that to $50. Second use was $500, lowering that to like $150. Penalties that are not meaningful at all. And so I have actually joined with others in urging the governor to veto that bill. I know that's a long shot, but the reason you ask for a veto, even if he doesn't veto it, you are sending a message that this bill went too far and we're going to come back and work on this next session. And again, I shared that with my constituents because we need them involved in making sure we have the tools to protect health and safety now that we're going forward with the legalization of the recreational use of marijuana.
There was kind of a bad thing at the very end of the session. The revenue estimate came in, and it was very discouraging in terms of the long-term revenues for the state. There might be some pressure on taxes. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I was glad that we were able to pass a budget with no tax increases, and I did support that. That write-down was a setback, and I think it's going to put some pressure on during the interim as the budget's being developed for the next year's budget. And what I'm planning to do, since we currently do not have a member of the Eastern Shore on the Budget Committee, I have been working directly with the chair, Chair Gazzone, the members of the Budget Committee, and with Senate President Bill Ferguson. I went to him in person and said, if we do not have a person on the budget committee, then I want to make sure that it's elevated to you, and I have a commitment to you that you will look out for the shore. And now that we've had this write down, I think it puts more pressure on to do that. So wherever we end up with the budget, we make sure that Eastern Shore receives its fair share. Again, I want to give Delegate Carl Anderton, having him on the House Appropriations Committee has been extremely beneficial, not only for Wicomico County, but for the shore. He helped me with some of my issues that came through appropriations. The special death benefits bill went through the Appropriations Committee, and of course, Carl knew the importance of that coming from Somerset County ECI correctional officer helping with that. So again, that was a setback, and I think a little bit of a wake-up call about fiscal responsibility.
What's on your radar screen right now?
So you work issues both preparing for the next legislative session, but then just also issues, partnerships that you can resolve issues in a number of ways. Sometimes it's budget, regulatory, legislation, just the partnerships. So you mentioned the inlet dredging. That has to remain a top priority. We have had boats coming into the inlet literally getting stuck and not being able to bring their seafood to the dock. So that is an urgent situation. Just met with the commercial fishermen last week, working closely with Andy Harris. His new role as chairman of the Ag Appropriations Subcommittee gives us a lot more leverage at the federal level to work all of these issues. So again, that would be an issue. Look, they went forward with an offshore wind bill that we believe is too much too soon. Everything from not just the visibility issues, but the impact on commercial fishing, the true cost to ratepayers and taxpayers, and the possibility of the transmission, making sure that it just doesn't come on Ocean City proper, where they've had other problems in other states, where they've had to spend, in one case in Rhode Island, $31 million to do the cleanup of the transmission because the cable lines ended up being exposed and the beach was closed and all kinds of issues. We need to learn from other states and make sure that doesn't happen here. I also want to bring up, again, I will stay focused on public safety. I'm not on that committee of jurisdiction, but I believe that public safety is the responsibility of all of us, that you, before you can work on housing and environment and even education, people have to be safe in their homes and in their communities. And so I will be working with not just law enforcement, but with victims groups, with the chambers, with our employers, with nonprofits on how do we make sure that we are as safe as we can be and push for reasonable legislation to make sure we're holding repeat offenders accountable and then doing as much as we can on the prevention side.
How can constituents in Wicomico, Worcester, Somerset County get a hold of their state senator, Mary Beth Carozza?
So we are always on our website that I know that you post, marybethcarozza.com. Again, I will continue to do regular Facebook posts, whether it's visiting with fire departments, chambers. We're doing the Senate scholarship presentations in the schools coming up. So I will continue to be as visible as possible. And I really hope to see people in their own neighborhoods and communities.
She's our state senator, Mary Beth Carozza, back from Annapolis, and we're thrilled she had time to check in with us here today at PAC 14. Thanks for being here, Mary Beth.
Thank you.
I'm Greg Bassett from the Salisbury Independent newspaper. Another edition of 101 right here on PAC 14.
First Shore Federal is proud to support PAC 14 and One-on-One. we'd encourage every business to support PAC 14 and pick a program and support it, and let's make a difference.